Professor Oberholster. I will facilitate this webinar, and I want to welcome you at the webinar on sustainable solutions for eutrophication in South Africa. And also a special welcome to our collaborator institutions, the WRC, the CSIR, and the American Chemical Society. Now, this is only one of a series of workshops or webinars. The first were held by the WRC in June 2024, and today we specifically look in this webinar to the progress made and implementation on the National Eutrophication Management Initiative by the Department of Water Affairs. But let me just give you a little bit more information on ASAF and on the Water and Sanitation Forum, of which I'm a member. ASAF mobilized its members and other experts to offer an independent and advice based on extensive examination of the best available peer-reviewed science and evidence. So what we do is we look specifically, our goal of ASAF is to look at science for policy. Hence, ASAF delivers science advice to support policymakers and implementation by government and other stakeholders. As you will see today, it will be evident that ASAF alone cannot achieve this mandate without our partners, and that's why we invited our collaborator institutes, but also other participants today, to whom we are really grateful joining this webinar today. Science advice and science engagement. Today our webinar is focused on water security. And one of the focus areas specifically is eutrophication in South Africa, which is a priority for water quality management and has become over the decades a large issue for water resource management in South Africa. Eutrophication influences negatively the fitness of the use of water for various water users in South Africa and do have financial impact on our ecological systems, our reserves, and ecosystem services in total. Now, in 2022, the Department of Water and Sanitation has launched the Eutrophication Management Strategy for South Africa. This is currently the national pathway to cut eutrophication. Now, what's important today for us is our webinar will focus on the progress to date in implementation of the strategy and what sectoral role players are contributing in this regard. As such, our webinar will be focused on solutions rather than diagnosing the problem. The problem has been identified and come over many years, and there's many scientific as well as reports related to the impact of eutrophication. So just take that in mind. I think that's the most important thing of this webinar today. We are also grateful to the Department of Water and Sanitation as well as other organizations for answering the call to engage on the progress and implementation of the eutrophication strategy of South Africa. Our session this morning will start with a leading presentation by the Department of Water and Sanitation. And I want to introduce Ms. Nyamande to present the first presentation for us. Ms. Nyamande.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Do I need to show my face? Am I audible?
You're audible. Yes,
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tobo Nyamande from Department of Water and Sanitation. I am the Director, Sources Directed Studies. I understand the visual impact of challenges associated with eutrophication. It underscores the urgent need for effective responses. With this context in mind, I will now summarize the key steps undertaken in developing the National Eutrophication Management Strategy. The strategy emphasizes a comprehensive approach that addresses the causes and effects of eutrophication, but now aiming to protect our water resources, enhance the ecosystem health. I would like to start by acknowledging the team members, the project management team, myself, and Ms. Mapifo Twala, the scientific manager, and Mr. Samgele Mnyango, our production scientist. Also acknowledging Mr. Jurko van Veek for being the main author of the report, and the committee members, and the special appreciation to the external reviewers for the invaluable contribution into shaping the report. I'm not gonna dwell much on this, but anyway, eutrophication is known as the nutrient enrichment of waters, resulting in the array of symptomatic changes, amongst which increase the production of algae and aquatic microphytes, deterioration of water quality, and others found to be undesirable and to interfere with water users. That is taken from Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. In terms of the strategy framework, we have the policy in place, which provides the vision, and the strategy, which describes the strategic actions, and the strategy into practice, which is more of a report produced to describe the role, institutions responsible, and the timeframes in terms of implementation, and monitoring and evaluation, which is a rollout of the implementation plan, monitoring, and reporting on implementation performances. In terms of the policy, the strategy is actually giving effect to the integrated water quality management policy, which we call it the umbrella policy, which was developed 2016 and 17, and the integrated water quality management strategy identified eutrophication as a priority water quality issue requiring urgent intervention. This is in terms of the types of eutrophication. We can see the natural eutrophication, which we are not really worried about, as the system can manage itself without any anthropogenic interferences. But in the other hand, anthropogenic eutrophication, which triggers nutrient enrichment in water bodies, and that needs to be managed. This is just to highlight eutrophication challenges. Professor Oberosa indicated already. Those are well researched and identified. We actually know much about it. What we need now is implementation or mitigation measures. Just the highlight of the untreated sewage going into the environment and landing into the water bodies. Old infrastructure which needs to be refurbished, agricultural impacts, settlements impacts. So in terms of the trophic status, that's the status till 2020, but in March this year, I checked our newest dashboards of eutrophication. Then I realized that the status remains. I didn't see any significant improvement. That's if any. So in terms of the policy outline, I'll only dwell in the chief objectives. For example, the objectives of this study was to limit anthropogenic nutrient loading of water resources, to reduce excess primary production in surface water resources, to protect aquatic ecosystems and their biological diversity, to secure water resources that are fit for use on a continuous basis, and to support ecologically sustainable development and justifiable socio-economic growth. In terms of the eutrophication management policy and the strategy, this is a roadmap indicating the policy statements and the strategy layout, of which the layout produced 14 technical and 5 supporting policy statements. So what is on the right side in terms of the strategies? We have developed 3 strategies, which is the core, the operational, and the supporting strategies, of which I'll a little bit elaborate further on this one, for example. So the core strategies focuses on the sources directed control, which is the first number there. And it's about the management of sources of impacts, and resource directed measures, number 2, which the focus is on the water resource and the remediation in terms of the mitigation. The operational strategies for the eutrophication management strategy is talking to the plan, which is the vision or the catchment management strategies. The do part, the application of the hierarchy of decision-making, talking to prevention of pollution at source, minimizing, recycling, or reuse of the effluent. The check box is talking to monitoring, and the act box talking to compliance, monitoring, and enforcement, which currently we really need to focus on in terms of the progress of implementation. Supporting strategies is actually self-explanatory, which talks to capacity building, research and innovation, technology, and collaboration in terms of private-public partnerships. Priority actions that need to be addressed for implementation. So addressing non-compliance of wastewater treatment works as the main culprit, and also to the phosphorus standards of 1 milligram per liter. So currently the departmental regulation unit is using the general and special effluent standards of 1984, of course, which is in the process of being repealed. So of which the orthophosphate general limits is 10 milligram per liter, and the special limit is 1 milligram per liter, which is aligning to this call. And that must be aligned as well, taking into consideration the limits set for the numerical resource quality objectives. So the receiving water quality objectives approach, the waste discharge charge system implementation, cooperation with government, private sector, and civil society, and the introduction of zero phosphate detergents in South Africa, which I think already is ongoing. It was easy for industries to adopt this because it meant saving for them as phosphates were becoming expensive. In continuation, the rehabilitation and restoration of water resources. The department is also embarking on the project for the rehabilitation management guidelines. Development of the implementation of program for retaining experienced, qualified technical expertise, treatment technologies to improve water quality, Provision of bursaries and training in terms of support of that capacity building I was referring to when talking to supportive strategies. Zooming into the implementation progress up to date. We have the development of the urban waterways. The city of Cape Town did the presentation aligning to that. And the development of the stormwater model bylaws, which is currently underway. And maybe what is lacking currently is the nutrient loading bylaws, which is in the process of planning process to be developed in the next coming 5 years. Existing lawful use regulations have to be developed and planned, and is on the public domain now for their consultation in this financial year. Development of the non-point source regulations, which is planned for the next financial year. Monitoring compliance to gazetted resource quality objectives, which is in place, and auditing is being done by the department. And this action is in the departmental annual performance plan, which is more of a strategic action. Regulations for strategic water source areas in collaboration with the Department of Water and Sanitation and the DFFE, of which we are also talking to the groundwater source, strategic water source areas. In terms of the operational strategies, talking to the development of the catchment management strategies, which we have started already, the Limpopo and the Vaal-Orange underway, and the development of the waste discharge standards to give effect to the resource quality objectives. That commenced with the Upper Vaal as the first in the 2023-24, and the review of the waste discharge system. We have this system up and running, and the piloting was done in the 3 catchments. And now the reviewing will be in the 2025-2026. So the catchment management strategies later, so will apply to the other catchment management agencies. Supporting strategies, I did talk to compliance, monitoring, and enforcement. The emphasis on the key sector operations network in terms of the collaboration and regulatory considerations in terms of administrative penalties, which are actually ongoing. I'll also try and show the slide next, talking to some of the penalties. Information systems. So we have integrated regulatory information system, which is already configured to receive water quality data. Training and capacity building, we have ongoing water quality management orientation course and formalized water quality training. Unfortunately, this I'm talking to the initiatives within the department, let alone other initiatives or research within the academic institution or the other sectors as well, in addition. Reporting, talking to monitoring and evaluation, we have the National Water Quality Management Forum. The Department of Water and Sanitation might be coordinating this, but it's actually for the whole, for the water sector. Different mining bodies attends, and the catchment management agencies. The Catchment Management Forum, which is the department is also represented there in terms of our regional office regulatory focal points. This is the slide I was talking about in terms of compliance enforcement, in terms of administrative penalties. This is just the indication of something is happening, notices issued, and directives issued. We also have the case registered with South African Police Services and the NPA. Eutrophication compliance monitoring is actually ongoing, and the purpose of eutrophication monitoring is to measure, assess, and report on a regular basis. Improvement in terms of monitoring. We have, for example, Inkomati Usutu Catchment Management Agency, setting a good example in terms of the implementation. The CMA is monitoring 11 dams using cyanolake's web application. They are monitoring chlorophyll A and cyanobacteria. The frequency 4 to 6 days per week, and data is reported daily. And the nature-based solutions and cleaner technology. Nature-based solutions involve the use of natural processes and ecosystems to address pollution challenges. And cleaner technology refers to innovation of environmental-based solutions that reduces human environmental impacts. For example, advanced membrane filtration. So we are also, as the department, engaged in cleaner technology to improve water quality in South Africa. That's ongoing. So colleagues, this is just the project management team as I've alluded to in the first slide. This is the information. If you would like to get anything for clarity as well, later after this webinar. So in terms of the website, that's indicated over there. With that, colleagues, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mande. I think very informative. You give us a good indication of the implementation and progress of the eutrophication management strategy, and I think that can really act as a baseline for us this morning going forward with the webinar. Thank you very much. I must get you to the university to come and lecture here.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we at this stage we are moving forward with the next presenter, and it seems like Mr. Frit Becker is not yet online available. So we will move then to Mr. Luyaba, and he's a specialist in water and sanitation at SALGA. So I'll present to you, and if we can get his presentation on the screen. Thank you very much.
A very good morning to everyone. Thanks, Prof. As said, my name is Lubabalo Luyaba. I am from the South African Local Government Association. I just want to check, is my presentation up and am I audible?
Mr. Luyaba, you are audible and your presentation is online.
Excellent. So yeah, I'll be giving a local government perspective on the implementation journey in terms of our eutrophication management strategy for South Africa. My colleague from DWS has covered quite a lot of ground, so that's going to save me time, and we can maybe focus a little bit more on some of the nuance. The presentation just has 4 parts: the essence of the strategy, which I think has been adequately covered. The reality check in terms of where we really are. I think the green drop gives us a sobering sense of whether we're coming or going. Obviously, then the municipal context and what is being done and what is to be done. In terms of the objectives, I think my colleague has covered these. The essence, from my perspective at least, is the first part, which is limiting the anthropogenic nutrient loading, primarily, I think in our context, from partly or completely untreated wastewater that makes its way to our water resources. And the other things are important, but I think they've been covered, so I'm going to leave that. And then 2022, we had green drop, which gives us a sense of how not so great things are. I think I've just highlighted the top 4 provinces that are not doing very well in terms of municipalities. So you've got Limpopo, you've got the Northern Cape, you've got the Northwest, and you've got the Free State. And these percentages are rather alarming, where they are above 50%. And it means, or rather, the challenge with this is that these are not things that you resolve overnight. Some of the challenges are systemic and structural. So you could bring in new pumps, get a process controller in place, but 3 months down the line, the plant will be back to not performing again. So the question is, what do we need to do, and what is really going wrong, and how do we stop this, which in my opinion, I think is probably the largest contributor to the compromising of our water bodies. My colleague has covered this part. So what we've been doing thus far, this is just an overview of each of the provinces and where we are in terms of municipalities responding with corrective action plans that respond to their non-compliant plants, which for all intents and purpose are discharging raw sewage into the natural environment. Where we still have a problem in terms of perhaps responsiveness is KwaZulu-Natal, Northwest, and the Northern Cape. But between SALGA, the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agent, DWS, and COCTA, there's a national response team that has provincial counterparts that are focusing on each of these provinces in order to support them to respond. And the submission of a corrective action plan is but one step. What we actually care about is the actual implementation of those plans. So there's a three-pronged strategy, which is one, get municipalities to respond, two, work on the quality of the submission once it's been sent, and three, support municipalities to implement. And as you can see, we're at different levels of progress in terms of that work. Obviously, the other processes are taking their course as they would, and that's what my colleague has covered. So I'm going to swiftly skip over that. Then from a municipal perspective, I think, colleagues, it's also important to appreciate, this is just one snapshot in terms of municipal strategic self-assessment. There's often a feeling that municipalities don't know what is wrong. I want to suggest that that feeling is unfounded. So in terms of what municipalities argue are the biggest challenges that they're facing, there's one, financial asset management. Number two, which is what I think we're talking about today, wastewater, environmental safety, and regulatory compliance. So that is a known challenge. There's obviously issues of revenue collection, operations and maintenance of assets, infrastructure asset management, water conservation, water demand management. I think those basically summarize what we all anecdotally know to be the challenges in our water sector generally, and specifically for municipalities. But I think it's noteworthy that number two there is the issue of wastewater, because as I say, if someone acknowledges that there is a problem, that's already half the battle. You've got a challenge when someone thinks there isn't a problem. So again, I think as our facilitator said, the question is not what is the problem, but what do we do about it? But it's comforting to know that the problem is acknowledged. And then I want to touch on these: revenue collection, O&M, infrastructure asset management. These three, if these are not done, you're not going to address that. If the money is not coming in, you can't do operations and maintenance, and you won't have effective infrastructure asset management, and therefore your wastewater system management is just not going to happen. So again, we need to be mindful that addressing one of these doesn't actually solve the issue. We need to address these concurrently we can look at water services provision in a municipality as a business that has different facets, and all of those different parts need to be working together if progress is to be seen. I think more good news, at least in the 6th administration, in terms of our priorities from 2019 to 2024, from the part of the department, there was coherence. And the idea or the hope was to have 100% wastewater treatment works being functional, and those are the sub-activities that were planned. I think we can all unanimously agree we're nowhere near this. If we're lucky, we're probably at 40%. So one hopes in the 7th administration, 2024 to 2029, this stays a national priority. Why that is important is that it stays on the radar in terms of reporting, and it allows for better coordination between the different departments, and there's greater accountability for it. Again, that doesn't solve everything, but it's a critical component in terms of moving us forward. But yeah, in the 2019 to 2024 period, we had it there, but we did not quite make the progress that we'd like to see. One hopes we don't then remove it in the 2024 to the 2029, which will be the 7th administration. More on what is being done. I think the objective and the rationale is obvious and clear in terms of progress. Again, this is what we've got between COCTA, MISA, DWS, and SALGA is a green drop improvement program that tries to look at various aspects of facets of what municipalities need to actually improve in terms of what they're doing. One of the things that we are trying to do differently this time around is working very closely with our councillors. You can think of councillors as a board. And if your board is not on board, so to speak, you're not going to move because your project prioritization is not going to be in place. The key performance indicators that municipalities will set themselves may not include what you want included, and consequence management inside the municipality may not necessarily happen. So what we're trying to do differently this time around is to recognize the power that councils have and try to get them on board to understand what it is that is the problem and what their role is in resolving the problem. As we've seen in what we've been doing previously, that's perhaps a mistake that we've made. Another one that perhaps may be of interest, you'll have heard a lot in the news. We've gotten a, probably almost $1 billion loan for water and sanitation to be facilitated through the Municipal Infrastructure Grant, focusing on water and sanitation. So one of the things that is already being done is that the municipalities that have been criminally charged or identified in the green drop as having seriously problematic systems, those are being prioritized in terms of that funding, but also they are being encouraged through various mechanisms to prioritize the repair and maintenance of their wastewater infrastructure with the allocations that they already have. Because again, sometimes you'll have a situation where the priorities do not necessarily respond to our topic for today, but that is being curbed. And also the conditions in the Municipal Infrastructure Grant have also been revised. So the issue of non-compliance notices from the department is an explicit point where if you have those, you are encouraged and sometimes forced to use your allocation to address those. And a condition has been put in place where municipalities are allowed to use, or rather must use, up to 10% of their allocation to deal with all non-compliance notices. There's other issues that have been put in place, and the most strategic of which is obviously issues around infrastructure asset management. So again, at a national level, government is using the tools that are available to encourage and force municipalities to respond to this very pressing challenge, which again is something that we've perhaps not done in the past. One, and this is going to be my last slide, another thing that we're looking at, which call an alternative approach, I've already spoken of. You typically have this situation where things are not happening, a municipality is taken to court by the ratepayers, the court gives operation and maintenance to the ratepayers, municipality pays the ratepayers, municipal viability is threatened, and all other things. And our hard-earned tax is used in litigation, or the DWS exhausts their available Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act options, and then they lay criminal charges with the South African Police Service. This is happening, but as you know, colleagues, if you go to SAPS, they've got to investigate. So it might be 3-4 years until something is done. And all the while, pollution continues to run down the streets. So what we've been doing differently, as I said, is revising the conditional infrastructure grant terms and forcing municipalities to start prioritizing this, addressing these issues. And work is ongoing to look at other grants, because we started with the Municipal Infrastructure Grant, but now work is going to be looking at the Water Services Infrastructure Grant, the Urban Settlements Development Grant, which is received by the metros, and the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant, to sort of have the same framework. And what that means is that all municipalities in their grant, their conditional grants, will have a provision or the ability to prioritize responsiveness to their wastewater challenges. We know that may not be enough, but one certainly thinks it's a start. Another thing we're introducing is escalation to a political level, so that there's accountability at that level and there's engagement. One of the things that we've learned is administrations and their councils have not always been on the same page, and that spells trouble. So again, we've put in place mechanisms to ensure that a council is fully aware at the point at which a non-compliance notice is issued. And again, this has started to yield some positive results in some municipalities. Early days, but yeah, work is ongoing in that regard. And then obviously there's issues, you can do that and still the problem persists. And then there's different avenues that we want to be exploring. So there's the voluntary municipality voluntarily request support from from national government, an agreement is entered into, or the department as a last measure revokes what's called an intervention in terms of the Water Services Act and Section 139. You'll also be aware, colleagues, that there's changes happening to the Water Services Act, and there's an introduction of a licensing regime in terms of who can be a water services provider in the context of a municipality. Those will be permanent changes that bring about, I think, transparency and consequence management for non-performance. But yeah, this is the suite of things that are happening at this point in time. And I think the takeaway is, one, the problem is known. Two, we're doing things differently to how we've done them in the past. And I think with a bit of time, we'll start seeing positive results at a national scale, because we've started seeing those positive changes at the level of municipalities. And thank you, Chair. That is it. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubayu. I think what's important, what comes out of this presentation is just again for us, the approach that we're taking must be collective to solve this big impact of eutrophication. Thank you for giving us also a little bit of background on the different progress of alternative approaches you're taking and revising of these approaches going forward. We really appreciate it. Okay, colleagues, we move then to the next presenter. We still try to connect with Mr. Fritz Becker, and our next presenter is Mr. Mark Klug. He is the CEO and co-founder of AMR in partnerships with SWPM. So I present Mr. Klug to you.
Good morning. Could you hear me?
Yes, Mark, we can hear you.
Good, thank you. Just want to see if you can you see my screen?
Not at this stage. There's it up now. We can see it clearly. Thank you, Mark.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for this opportunity to present on behalf of ARMA and the SWPN, the Strategic Water Partner Network. Looking down the program, when I was asked to join this panel, I was extremely humbled. Haven't seen as many degrees, PhDs, and masters and experts in the water field for some time. I, by my background, come from a process and quality background, and my journey into water began actually as a very youngster as a whitewater kayaker. So my passion for water has always been my passionate interest. And in later years, after a professional career in business and corporate, I am now full-time within the social sustainable impact space. So my presentation, and I was glad to hear at the intro that our focus is not to tell people what we already know. It's really to take a different angle from the NGO sector and what I'm hoping to be a more public-private partnership space for understanding what is actually happening on the ground already, and perhaps where that partnership can be strengthened. So ARMA itself is a South African non-profit organization that's been in operation for almost a decade. It started because of a large sewage spill on the main Yukske River around 2000 and late 14 and 15. And right from that early stage, ARMA realized that it wasn't wanting to waste time and money fighting like the old activist world and using lawyers to necessarily fight in courts. Our objective was to listen and understand. So in its onset or the outset, ARMA is a protection device. It's a defense mechanism. If you think of ARMA, most of the things in the natural world are indeed covered with armor to protect themselves from an attacker. And water is under attack, as we all know. So armor, when we're asked to come and assist and help in communities or within the private sector, is often asked, do we do cleanups? And we don't. Effectively, whilst cleanups are a part of the mechanism of reaching the problem, creating the awareness and dealing with matters, we are an awareness and behavioral change organization. And our Voice for Water serves over 8,000 members. And we reach across the country and indeed internationally and through Southern Africa and increasingly up into Africa. Our mission is vested in our name to encourage action for responsible management of our rivers. And by that, we are willing and happy to challenge where there are problems or identify incidents, identify the accountable parties. But our aim is to work together to resolve it. And that's something we've done from the onset with forming a working relationship with Johannesburg Water. When I say working, we are clearly a voice. We created a working group environment to represent the civil society. And we strengthened those links over the years with DWS and the partnership with the likes of SWPN. And now ARMA chairs the XK Management Forum, the HENAPS Management Forum, and the Bronchosprite. And we were looking to strengthen that representation so that the Voice for Water enables the problems and challenges to be linked between civil society and institutions that are deemed to be accountable. But as you'll hear through this talk, the aim is to actually encourage people to understand that we're all part of the problem and therefore can be part of the solution. So ARMA in its essence is a network of networks, just like rivers, and our mutual vision is to restore water. So when I was considering what to do in this talk, I actually have had, in the last 2 weeks, I've had two examples perhaps that could be utilized. I called them a walk down the river. One of them involved in paddling down the river last Monday. So the walk down the river actually was as late as yesterday, where we were looking to identify a sewage spill within the Klein-Jaskei River that runs through the northern Joburg suburbs and has had a continual sewage problem, which the department knows about, the institutions know about, and ARMA has been working because it needs capital infrastructure and it needs a substantial investment into the infrastructure. But when it comes to the subject that we're looking at today, what struck me yesterday is often that the scientific understanding is not necessarily being carried through to the population of South Africa, who are all in one way or another accountable. Because on this walk yesterday, the picture on the left, you can see there's a clear example of the river. That's the state of the actual river. It's been running like that for over a year. And yet the picture in the middle clearly shows where, for the whole of the winter season and beyond, there's been water and wastewater streaming out of a private property development. The picture on the right was actually taken last Monday. And this involved an actual kayaking trip that we did through the upper reaches of the Jaskei, which to our knowledge is probably a first ascent of that section. And it was done with a couple of team members of the emergency services of Johannesburg in preparation for understanding what could be facing us in the next few months as our rains arrive. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see there's a person standing on the edge of what is effectively an unapproved landfill site that is currently pouring into the upper reaches of the Jaskei. And again, we're not here to tell us what we already know, but it's really to highlight the challenge that what we're facing at the moment is only the tip of the iceberg, because we've been in a 10-year plus slow period of the economy. And my concern and focus is to understand that if we don't change what we're doing now, then the desire to see another 1 million to 5 million consumers enter the South African space, which I believe is entirely possible as our economy turns, has to be married by a change in the integrated waste management and in the scientific understanding that can be used to do things differently than we're doing them already. And it was great to hear the department's summary of the plans under the way. So that picture was taken last Monday, and it probably represents an estimated 20 to 40 cubic hectares of illegal waste sitting on the banks of the river. So when people and parties ask us about cleanups are not there to clean up the waste. Our aim and objective is to one day hope that we won't have any waste or litter falling into the river. I completed a 15,000-kilometer trip across Africa 2 years ago. Part of this was an exercise to actually understand what is going on with waste and what is going on with water across the continent. And I've recently come back from America, Ireland, and the UK to also understand what is being done to address the exact same problems and challenges. And my work there started 40 years ago, but it was nice to see where the successes have been achieved, but where we can learn from those and adapt and adopt them for our South African environment. So when I was asked the title of the presentation, and I said, turning the tide the natural way, the reason I described it as turning the tide is that as we deal with calls coming in to assist Joburg Water, other municipalities and the institutions to deal with matters in the river, one of the biggest challenges we have is the perception of understanding that do we have a problem or do we not? Where is the source coming from? And is the source, and who's accountable for the source? So I'm putting this on the screen today as a wish actually to this team of people that are online, and please approach me if you can assist, is that we've developed a simple classification in that the left-hand side states that a river hopefully and ultimately should be clear, or should we say arguably green, that it looks attractive, it looks healthy. Brown rivers are often reported as being the problem by the emotional public, and yet the rivers of certainly Gauteng and the Cape, in terms of its tannin levels, often do run brown naturally. And this begs the question that ultimately a lot of people are pointing the fingers purely at the chemical industry, and yet not understanding that there is a natural process behind the very problem we're discussing today. And that's where the difference between brown and black is, because in the last month, and it happens every year around this time, 1 month before the actual rains arrive, we have an increase in the amount of calls that are phoned in about the black condition of the river, the fact that there are sewage spills and that the river has got chemical toxic spills. In our time, but I would like to back this up with more scientific research, and we have partnerships with various universities that we'd like to engage on this, is that really what a black river is often the natural process of anaerobic decomposition, and of course then the eutrophic state that can follow thereafter. But people don't understand, and I'm not talking to the parties perhaps here, the converted online, but it's the desire to know how do we get that information out to a broader understanding, into schools, into universities, to understand that there is there's a natural condition that actually is necessary in the rivers. And indeed that leads to the next state, a white tide. A white tide is probably our most common call, where people phone in regarding 2-meter piles of foam in the rivers. I wasn't going to put a slide presentation with thousands of photographs. We've all seen those. But we get up to 2 meters and 40-meter long trails of white foam, 2 meters deep. But what people don't do is associate the fact that the very foam they're looking at is linked to the fact that behind them in their estate, there's somebody washing a car with detergents that's running down the path straight directly into the river where they live. But of course, that's happening all across the entire region. And in the month before the summer rains, in the month before September, people are backwashing their pools. People are doing and going about their normal business whilst missing the objective or the point that they are actually part of the challenge. Whereas what we are looking to try and identify as quickly as possible is what we call a grey tide, where then we have a team of monitors across the region, across the catchment areas, and we use the mechanism of the water and sanitation community forums within DWS's structure and the catchment forums for the river in order to identify actual incidents. Again, there's a perception in the city by consumers, by the residents, by the society of South Africa, that all municipalities in Johannesburg Water and the department are able to see all pipes, all stormwater drains and all bridges that are blocked with consumer waste or erosion or sand that is causing the infrastructure to be under pressure. But grey tides, we then, or what we're trying to establish is understanding that there is actually a fault, either a broken pipe, a blocked pipe, which is causing surge. So turning the tide for me is about understanding how do we help assist, and from this group of parties, perhaps assist improving the knowledge transfer, the education, and the systems that we can put in place that could speed up this process of the eyes and ears across the country. And I know, and I'm part of certain projects that are underway on that basis. So that begs the question, can we turn the tide? Well, I've heard parties and some as very qualified academics stating the scientific basis that we can't, that maybe it's too late, that maybe it can't be achieved. Unfortunately, I come from a background of being an eternal optimist and a healthy realist. I don't paddle rivers on flat water going round and round in circles. I take on whitewater rivers, and I've been grateful and paddle rivers all over the world. And I've seen the fact that around the world where we have had the same challenges, if the correct action is taken, we can reverse the trend. And I saw a documentary, Beyond Zero. I recommend anybody watches, whilst I was on the plane across the States. And there's a simple statement there that said it's taken us 150 to 200 years to create this problem by accident. I don't think genuinely people have got up and decided, today I'm going to go and damage or affect the environment, or indeed the society that relies on water and lives in the environment. But the comment was that if we can use our human ingenuity in order to reverse this trend, in order to make changes. So I noticed that across Europe, all of the products that come from Coca-Cola, I can mention them because it's a factual base, I've already got the lids on them that do not detach from their bottles. Whereas we need to implement changes within South Africa as quickly as we can. As I found that within Ireland, they're perhaps 20 years ahead of their recycling plans and their integrated waste management plans. But we don't have to wait 20 years. We can accelerate. All the technology, all the science is available, and there are willing parties and people that can adapt their behavior. So as I've summarized there, if we keep doing what we're doing, then we're just going to get what we're getting. And that famous quote about Einstein says that's insanity. You're very well aware that the chemical nature of the products we're using needs to be adapted and changed, but it can't happen overnight. We can't just miraculously ban plastic bags across South Africa or stop using polystyrene or indeed many of the chemicals we're using, but we can certainly change the path that we are heading down if we want to marry that with an increase in consumer spend that's going to come as our economy turns. And certainly that's before we even look at Africa. So that leads to where, and do I believe we can change it? Yes, I do. I believe that by changing and nudging consumer behavior, but in working with industry, and then having the governance that is overseen by policy and governance from the department, we can then assist giving water resilience. And ultimately, that's the key here, is the nature-based solution is to actually help water do what it's always been able to do. But across Johannesburg, it was never designed to do what it's doing now. 130 years ago only, this was a field full of veld grass with no trees. We've had a policy of planting trees all over Johannesburg, which seems a bit counterproductive to the fact that we are a water-scarce city, whereas grass would be a far better method to use. We're looking to build more and more concrete and more urban development. Well, we can't move Johannesburg and all leave. We'd have to go to another piece of Africa and destroy that. But what we can do is ensure that if a building and property developer is going to take a large piece of land, they should be having to comply with the same standards that a mine has to stand to, or a chemical plant. Because the ultimate product of a building another 200 or another 10,000 houses or 20,000 houses is that we're creating more consumers, more society members who are going to be disposing their water directly into the system. And as the department representative made a point to earlier, we have to change the standards that we're actually aiming to achieve. And the last point, of course, which we all know, we are all part of the source, and therefore we can be part of the solution. That picture at the bottom of the screen is actually from the same paddle last Monday. And if you see the front of my kayak, and we were doing a documentary for looking at the conditions of the rivers, you can see that the streaks in the water are actually rolls of packaging that have been dumped into the river. These rolls are almost half a kilometer long. They're packaging that has been dumped because their labeling was wrong. And ultimately, whilst we can point a finger of blame at the industry, the challenge is that we have to have an integrated solution for our waste management that will then marry up hand in hand with the very science that we are talking about today. And ultimately, I'm not focusing too much on the subject of eutrophication because there's far better experts on that online. What I'm looking at is how can we put in a mechanism, how can we align with those experts to accelerate the process of change that we have within our community of Johannesburg and South Africa to become a world leader and actually learn from what's been done elsewhere before the upswing in our economy comes. Most of the other societies around the world have already been there through their 10, 20, 30-year growth, creating bigger problems. We still have an opportunity to sort it out. So our approach for that is to start not with millions of people, but to start with one that puts their hand up, who normally phones us to ask for assistance. And then we guide and assist them to become not just talking about the problem, but an actionist that actually starts doing something within their community on the ground. We link to DFFE there for the indicator forum, and we'd like to strengthen that ability to link what's happening on the ground directly in communities through the departments to actually the industries that can be part of the change. And this loop that I've put here basically is illustrating that we take people to become activists that then become water actionists, doing something about the challenge. In doing that, they become a warrior in their own right, and we want to support and grow them as warriors in their community. So the picture you see there is actually of Alexandra in Johannesburg, who have successfully grown from just 1 to 4 people. And now we have 2,500 volunteer warriors that are on the ground making a transformational change in their community. From that, we take a subset of people that become water monitors, who actually have an interest and a passion or a skill that they already have. There's a misconception that unemployed means unskilled, unwilling, unable. But actually, they're just out of work or they're just unemployed. But there are people with artisan skills, there are people with diplomas, academic qualifications, training certificates coming out of their ears. So we've identified those parties who become monitors. They have a similar passion for water that everybody has on this group. And we want to see how can they be upskilled and brought back into an economic cycle or a circular economy as they pursue to become better stewards in their own right. The box and we wish to replicate this across all catchments as it's growing. On the far right, there's a box that says smart approach, to have water speak with us. Armour's grown to a point where it needs to capacitate and it cannot rely on a group of people. We need to be able to, we need to be able to actually use technology and integrate with some of the other plans and systems that are beginning to appear across the city. We have a technology partner that is willing to work and has already built a beta test that enables those water warriors to be able to, from QR codes, upload the information that they are making, the information and illustrations of the data and the actions that they're making on the ground. So that system's already in place. But like all NGOs, we need support with private sector partners who would be able to help capacitate it. The bottom green box, is that we wish and we would like to support natural-based solutions, nature-based solutions, because many millions get spent on concrete, many millions get spent on engineering solutions, but actually nature has its own way of dealing with floods. The flood systems within South Africa, Joburg, are quite unique to the pattern of the Witwatersrand, and each province has its own typical floods and stormwater. Part of my trip across the States took me through to LA, where sadly you see that all you see is concrete and all the rivers have become is concrete. So if that's what we choose to do, that's what we'll end up with. Whereas I believe that there are ways to use the nature-based solutions that are available and we can learn from the rest of the world and apply them to South Africa, but we need to do, and we need to start doing it now. Projects like the City of Joburg's relationship with SALGA and the Water Warriors and the nanobubble technology that is being trialed within Hartbeespoort has to be an integrated solution of understanding these are things that have worked in certain areas. Can they be adapted and applied for South Africa's use? And can they be done at a far lesser cost, perhaps, than some of the systems and processes that are being proposed to start again? And finally, then, education, knowledge and transfer, experimental learning. We have a program with the Harties Boat Company on Hartbeespoort Dam, and we've expanded this program to other areas in the province. and indeed we would like to go countrywide. By taking youngsters from schools, universities out, you begin to change their experiential understanding of what it is they are doing, both negatively, and reward them positively because of the changes they're making. All the parties, with due respect on this group, on this call today, are unlikely to see directly in their daily work the final product of the efforts and energies we're all putting. It will be our kids' kids that will see. It took London 30-odd years to turn that tide, and is still facing the very challenges that we're discussing here with the human impact of urbanization and stormwater management and chemicals. But I do believe that if we can change what we're doing now, we can make a change, and that will come through from helping and assisting the broader education and knowledge transfer. So some of the warriors have actually traveled to Rwanda. Some of them are looking to travel further afar. We'd like to support that initiative to understand how can they learn from what we've already been doing elsewhere in the world. Okay, so one summary here. How do we turn that tide? Well, it's fantastic to see that the green and the blue drop audit reports are back in place, because now at least we can measure where we are. We all know the stats were there. We all know that it doesn't look great. And yet if we look and we read into there, the critical nature of infrastructure is not the same figures that get bandied around in the press. We already have an infrastructure in South Africa that can be repaired. And we were part of the summit in 2022 that was held, the 3-day summit on the water summit. You know, and what resonates with me there is that the objective was to understand, what do we need to do to fix this? Fixing something is different than what do we need to do to solve it. And then the premise was put forward. What do we need to do to capacitate for the future that we know is heading to us very fast? More people, more urbanization, more chemicals. And that means we've got to collaborate through the network of networks that we have in order to work together to solve this. And then I believe the government should be, and the departments should be very focused on its policy and governance to say what we do and then do what we say. My QA background drummed that into me. You don't need 100 or 500-page document. We have documents that have been well written and are world standard documents, and we have world standard policy. What we need to do is enable the governance of the parties and the people that are necessary to ensure. Most of all, that involves us as consumers and society adhering to what we can do, and that's the partnership with the commercial and the retail world that I think can be strengthened. There was a note earlier about the standards that we are aiming for, the rest of the world versus us. Well, even if all of our wastewater treatment works were functioning to 100%, we all know that the rivers would still be suffering from the challenges of eutrophication, because we'd be only aiming at the standard that's going to land us on the moon, whereas we need to actually aim at a standard that is going to improve the resilience of water and tackle the fact that we knowingly increase the volume of the Hennips River by more than double. We knowingly are pumping water that's going back into our rivers and dams that is only meeting a standard that is going to hit the moon. We need to aim for the stars. We need to be able to understand that how do we improve and change our standards. Otherwise, a lot of the energy and effort and the money that's going to be spent to fix and then solve and capacitate will just end up with the same challenges. So I've put a summary here, the eutrophication rugby team. Now, what I mean by this is that if I watched the rugby that happened last week, and indeed the World Cups, and I happened to be traveling during the period of the Olympics to see the world's best actually perform, is if we put the same energy behind and the same resources and the same, even a fraction of the marketing spend that we put behind our retail sector, that we do behind alcohol, telecoms, cars, retail consumer products. If we just put a fraction of that, but with the same united teamwork as a country that we do behind our rugby and our soccer, then we would become the world leading example of how to turn this tide and deal with the challenges that we're facing, that many other countries in the world are still facing. And there I put a request out to everybody that's listening, if you would wish to be part of that. It'd be great to have a better national pride to our water and waste. I said I wasn't going to put tons of photographs, but I want to be able to put something that shows the tangible outcome that is happening because of some of the work that's being done across the city. The pictures on the left, the two pictures, They come from the leafy suburbs of Johannesburg on the Kleinjakske. That's a chemical spill coming from a paint factory or a dye factory that is yet to be identified. And over a year later, in fact, 2 years later, it's been impossible to identify exactly where this happens, but it happens at least once a month. And the picture on the bottom left is taken last night, just before sunset, right outside an area which is not an informal settlement. This is a prestigious area of residential property. And I wish to make a point that often people think that pollution follows poverty. Now it does because of the lack of resource. It does because of the lack of support, and because of the misperception that actually they are to blame, as opposed to that we all are. Whereas that picture actually shows that pollution follows profit, because that's just a volume of waste that is created by a residential area that has nowhere to take it. And I really wish to be part of the ongoing changes in our waste management, of which is linked back to the retailers and the chemical companies that can assist on that process. The picture of the green area is actually Alexandra. That is the outcome of the work of the energy of the water warriors that have been taking this into their own community. And you see at the top that we've been living under a focus on from the community for the community. That's our modus, that's our approach. But I've added that in, and country, because there's nowhere else that I've seen the impact in the same way take hold as having 4 people who become 2,500 right under the heart of the financial capital of Africa. And that's been done and achieved because of partnership of certain companies, certain organizations, and I really thank everybody that's part of that, and we wish to see it go forward. So thank you. That's my presentation. I realize it wasn't a scientific presentation. There's me standing looking over the Hartbeespoort Dam, and I am pleased to see the collaboration that is happening there from Michali's Water with the various private sector and government bodies. And it's nice to see a collaborative way to try and address one of the biggest challenges. And I'm also very glad to hear that we are looking upstream to the source, because I believe that small amounts of money can go a long way to actually dramatically change what we're putting into our rivers as opposed to what we're taking out of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, I think excellent presentation. It doesn't always need to be scientific. I think what you just mentioned to us is the following, if I can summarize your presentation. We're all part of the problem, and we all must be part of the solution. I think that's important. Thank you for the initiatives of the water warriors. I think it becomes, for us, important what you say there. It's not always by complaining, but what can we do? So excellent presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right, colleagues. So we're moving forward. It seems like Mr. Fritz Becker is online. He had some problems, connection problems. He's the executive director of Garib Watch, and I'm going to introduce you to him. You can start, Fritz, with your presentation.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clear, and I can see your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just, I'm working, apologies for the technical glitch. I'm working in a roundabout way this morning, with the cell phone in one hand and the computer in the other. My talk's name is the Sewage, Salt and Sediments, the Water Quality Assessment on the Lower Vaal-Orange River System. By Garib Watch. We started this Garib Watch NPC non-profit company to improve the water quality of the Lower Vaal-Orange River system, with the main aim to develop a management plan and a mitigating plan. And it's the stakeholders developing this plan for this, as we started seeing that the water quality is deteriorating. Okay, next slide, please. The study area is the heart of the Orange River system. From in the Vaal River, the
Apologies, sorry,
Yes.
we have lost your presentation. I'm not certain if it's Alwan that's sharing, but we had it earlier on, now we've lost it. If the colleagues can please share it again.
Okay, can just let me know if you find my presentation. It was on just now.
Yes, it was, but as soon as you started, then it just disappeared. Alwan, if you can assist on that side, because I think you were the one that was flighting the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, colleagues, let's just hang on a minute or two so that we can check if we can get Frick's presentation back on the screen again. I've seen the chat box, we had 29 messages. It seems like there's a lot of activity after the few presentations before this one. Yeah, keep your questions in the question section, especially related to all the presentations we presented this morning. And Mark, Frick, it seems like your slide is on.
Thank you. Just the next slide, please, showing the study area. Yes, our study area is in the heart of the Orange River system, in the heart of the Kalahari. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the Vaal River. And we work from the Bloemhof Dam in the middle Vaal River, and the Van der Kloof Dam in the middle Orange River, all the way to Onseepkans in the lower Orange River system. Next slide, please. We've identified a perfect storm of risks to this area. And I'll start with the acid mine drainage from the Witwatersrand basins. And we've calculated an amount of about 132,000 tons of salts coming down the Vaal River every year. The next major risk is the affected runoff from Gauteng southern municipalities. Now we know of 63 million cubic meters of raw sewage going down towards the Vaal River every year, and it is expected that the amount of runoff from southern municipalities, affected runoff, would be about 690 million cubic meters per annum by 2050. The Lesotho Highland Water Scheme is coming into play in 2028, where another 490 million cubic meters per annum will be diverted towards Gauteng. And then there are local point sources of pollution in the Northern Cape region. On the slide that you're showing at the moment, we've identified monitoring localities in our study area. And we initiated a quarterly sampling monitoring program as the Department of Water Affairs stopped monitoring in 2014. So we've got 8 years, close to 8 years of very good data on these localities. And I'm doing research on the findings that we found on the data. It's about 53 variables that we have. And as I said, it's close to 8 years of data. Next slide, please. Following the process, it's a US EPI process where we link the stressor to the endpoint. This through this from the source, stressor pathway, timeframe, receptors, and endpoints. And I've conducted 5 separate investigations in that area. The first investigation was on the point sources of pollution, to really understand what is coming out from the wastewater treatment works and from the irrigation return flows. I'm talking about the sources of pollution within our study area. My second study was a stressor assessment with the use of international water quality guidelines, not the South African water quality guidelines, which are outdated. And thirdly, I did accounting for plant nutrients in the river to evaluate the risk of over-fertilization because of the amount of phosphate, nitrate, and potassium in the water. Then I calculated the salt load from the Vaal River towards the Orange River. And finally, I did an investigation of the water quality changes during high flow conditions. Next slide, please. I started this investigation by sampling the effluents of all the wastewater treatment works in the study area, going from Berkeley West, Warrington, Bloemhof, Christiana, Hartswater, Uppington, Jan Kempdorp, and Hooptown, and I also sampled a number of irrigation return flows. Now, irrigation uses approximately 89% of the water in this region. And if I refer to the Water Research Commission report of 2005, that states that close to 30% of the irrigation water returns back into the system. So we've tested both these qualities and found interesting results, which I'll show you now. Before that, whilst we were there, we lodged criminal procedures against these municipalities because we found that the raw sewage were being discharged into the river, directly into the river from all these municipalities that I listed there. We started with the SAPS criminal charge and then charged them at the Environmental Inspectorate. We got DWS directives against the perpetrators, and we also lodged complaints with the South African Human Rights Committee. The water quality, next slide, please. Yes, next slide. The water quality that we found, and I'm just quickly going through this, and what was interesting, the average E. coli count that we found in the effluents was more than 8 million, 8.5 million counts per 100 milliliters. What I looked at was the difference between these two water qualities, the wastewater treatment works and the irrigation return flows. And I found very high ammonia counts in the wastewater treatment work effluents of close to 30 milligrams per liter, total nitrogen, inorganic nitrogen of 36. Suspended solids also high in the wastewater treatment works, orthophosphates, manganese, and iron. And we use these as markers to identify which effluent source is responsible for what we find in the river. The irrigation return flows was very saline, but we found high nitrate in the irrigation return flows. The salinity was more than 3,000, the TDS, and the EC 521. Then we found a high sulfate, chloride, sodium, magnesium, fluoride, boron, and chromium concentrations in the irrigation return flows. And that helps us tremendously to when we evaluate our quarterly water monitoring results to see which sources are responsible for the pollution. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we looked at the South African water quality guidelines and found that it was wonderful guidelines, but they're 30 years old at the moment, and I think the single value criteria that they use are not really applicable to the water quality evaluation at the point. An example is for the metals, where you need the dissolved organic carbon and the hardness and the pH to evaluate the metal concentration. And another example is the E. coli, where in South Africa, the South African water quality guideline states the fecal coliform should be less than 1 for irrigation, and the international guidelines state that it should be less than 100, which makes a huge difference for the exporters. If you could just go one slide back, please. I see you jumped one forward. Thank you. So I did an investigation or a literature study on the international guidelines, which you see then. I've applied these guidelines for irrigation, domestic use, and the aquatic ecosystems to the data that we've generated in the Orange River. Next slide, please. I've applied it at a number of localities, but we're looking at this one locality, which you in the top right hand of the screen there is Vaal-Douglas-Weir, and it's situated in the Vaal River just before the confluence with the Orange River. So I've zoomed into this locality, and there's a lot of water use from this area of communities in the region. Lots of irrigation, lots of potable water use, and of course aquatic ecosystems in that region. Next slide, please. Then I looked at the upstream in the Vaal River segment is the Bloemhof Dam, that's on the left-hand side, and the Vaal-Douglas-Weir is on the right-hand side. And this stressor analysis that I did with using the International Water Quality Guidelines show that the exceedances or the percentage exceedances at the upstream site, Vaal-Bloemhof Dam, and we can see there the E. coli has been exceeded, the E. coli threshold, total suspended solids for irrigation, E. coli for irrigation and human consumption, aluminium for aquatic ecosystems, iron for aquatic ecosystems, and domestic use. And that is already upstream from our study area. Downstream at Vaal-Bloemhof Dam, there's a number of variables or stresses that were added because of irrigation return flows and the wastewater treatment work discharges that I showed you just now. The stressors that we identified, E. coli, TDS, for both domestic and irrigation, chloride for irrigation, total nitrogen for irrigation, suspended solids for irrigation, and then for aquatic ecosystems, aluminium, iron, and mercury, which is also a problem for domestic use. Next slide, please. This slide, I'm not going through all the detail, but it shows the stresses that we've identified with this 8-year monitoring period, and the evaluation and the percentage of risk of non-compliance with these international guidelines. And it makes good readings. Actually, some of it is quite shocking. This is in the Vaal River. It shows, and I'm sorry I cannot point on my screen that you can see it, but I'll quickly highlight the main risks that I see to domestic use. If anybody uses this water without treatment, and the chances of using the water without treatment is very good, because 76% of the wastewater treatment works in the Northern Cape doesn't work. That's according to the Green Drop report of 23. So there's a 93% risk of the spread of disease because of the pathogenic bacteria, viruses, protozoan, elements in the potable water, if it is not treated. And it is not treated properly, because we know that 60% of the water treatment works. The potable water treatment works doesn't work properly. Also, according to the Green Drop report of 2023. Then there's a risk to human use of mercury, manganese, and iron. There's a 12.5% risk because if I look at manganese, the neurotoxic effect, and iron, an iron overload may cause fibrosis and immune system impairment. But focusing on the irrigation, the E. coli, total nitrogen, suspended solids, TDS, and chloride poses a risk. With TDS, the salinity, that poses a major risk. And one of the risks of salinity is the mobility and availability of toxic trace metals because of the high salinity, increased because of saline conditions towards crops. And then crops are sensitive to racist salinity because of that will cause the average yields to decline. Just one mention on total nitrogen, on the risk of total nitrogen on crops. It affects the yield, but it also causes over-fertilization, because the irrigators fertilize, and they don't necessarily take into account the amount of fertilizer already in the water. We're talking about the phosphate, nitrogen, and potassium. I'll get to that just later. And then aquatic ecosystems, we see a major risk of the trace metals, aluminium, iron, and mercury at that point in the river. Next slide, please. Yes, here I did accounting for the plant nutrients in the river, and to explain this properly, I looked at the requirement that all the crops in the study area need, the fertilizer that is added to the crops. In this specific instance or example, I used the grapevines, and the fertilizer requirement is 60 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, 20 kilograms of phosphate per hectare, 100 kilograms of potassium per hectare, with a water allocation of 15,000 cubic meters per hectare per season. And what we can see on that table is that the total inorganic nitrogen at these localities, and this is lower down on the Orange River, from Boegeberg, Appington, Kanon, Eiland, Kakamas, and Onseepkans, already the river water already contributes between 8.35 and 19.85% of the requirement, which means if the amount of nitrogen is not considered before fertilizing the crops, then the other fertilization will recur. Orthophosphate, there was very little orthophosphate in the river, but with the potassium, there's up to close to 50% of the potassium is already in the river water. And if that is not accounted for when irrigating grapevine, this instance, then the magnesium uptake of the crop of the grapevines will be impeded, and also the nitrate uptake. So this will definitely affect production. And we're looking at the sources of the nitrogen and the potassium. Firstly, the nitrate we see in the wastewater treatment works, as I showed you just now, very high nitrate, but also in the irrigation return flows. With the potassium, I found from the other non-government organizations that work in the Upper Vaal River, they sent me some of the Rand water data showing that the high potassium is coming from ArcelorMittal, or potentially ArcelorMittal has been pointed out, and I also see that during certain times of the year when there's a discharge of high potassium. Next slide, please. Then there's a discrepancy between what we find in the river and what is reported by the Department of Water and Sanitation on the amount of salt that is coming from the Vaal River towards the Orange River. And I did the calculation at Vaal-Douglas River that I showed you, is just upstream from the Vaal-Orange River confluence. And fortunately, some of the water or the Water User Association, that region, samples the daily or weekly EC sampling at Vaal-Douglas River, and they do daily flow measurements, and we could calculate the amount of salt coming from the Gauteng region, from the upper Vaal towards the Orange, and we were dumbstruck by the results. And I used a 5-year period from 2018 to 2022, and found that during low flow conditions, the amount of salt per annum discharge was close to 100,000 tons. As you can see there, 96,000 tons in 2018, 144,000 tons per year 2019. And that more or less represents the flow from the sewage works, the irrigation return flows, without major flows from upstream. And then in 2021, there was a few flood events that I'll show you just now. And in 2022, and the amount of salt discharged to the Lower Orange River increased to 1.5 million tons in 2021 and 3.5 million tons in 2022. And we also see on the bottom right hand of your screen now, you'll see the linear trend, the increasing linear trend of salinity at Douglas Weir from about 200 to close to 300 within a 5-year period, which is a lot given such a short, relatively short time period. Next slide, please. On these graphs, you'll see the river flow in the blue. That's the Orange River at Uppington. And what we try to do is we saw that there's something happening during flood events. And we sampled the first flush of flood events and found that there's a very good correlation between flow and salinity, flow and suspended solids, flow and E. coli, and flow and trace metals such as aluminum and iron, which means, and this especially when the Vaal River is in flood, then there's a massive amount of E. coli coming from the upper regions of the Vaal River into the Orange River, and salt. And if you look at the top left graph, you see a small flood right to the left that was in 2019, in May 2019, and that flood was unseasonal. It happened in May. That's not the rainy season in Gauteng, and we analyzed that specific flood, and what we found is on the next slide. The blue is that flood peak in 2029, and the red is the hospitalizations because of diarrhea at one hospital in Uppington, the Dr. Harry Surtees Hospital, and a near perfect correlation between the flow, its unseasonal flow in the Orange River, and the hospitalizations. And we did this because many people in this area, in the Uppington area, complained because of diarrhea after that flood event. And the only conclusion that one can make is that there's a massive amount of bacteria, of affected water, of sewage water, untreated sewage water coming down the Vaal River into the Orange River, and it affects all the communities downstream. And this must be viewed in the same light as the water purification works aren't performing very well, the potable water purification works. After we found this, we can report that we've set up a meeting with the Department of Health and with the municipalities, and this improved. I think the municipalities, especially the municipality of Uppington, improved their water treatment since then. But all the other municipalities in this region, downstream from the Upper Vaal, may experience this during unseasonal and also seasonal flood events, where the first flush of water is highly polluted. Next slide, please. Thank you. That is all that I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Fritz, for your comprehensive background on the specific basin and the impact around it. We really appreciate it, and yeah, I see you did overcome the connection problem as well. So thanks for being part of this webinar this morning, but it's going almost to afternoon. Colleagues, we're moving forward. I just want to, before I hand over to Dr. Malusi Chwala, the Manager of Science Advisory and Strategic Partnership Program of ASAP. He will facilitate the panel discussion, and you will see on the program we've got different specialists from different institutes that form part of the panel. Again, listen to the panel. And because afterward there will be a question and answering session, I just want to remind you again, remember the title of this webinar today is Sustainable Solutions for Eutrophication in South Africa. And as I mentioned, our goal for science for policy. And then lastly, that we look specifically at solutions that we need to focus and moving forward that we try to get out of this webinar today. I'm now handing over to Dr. Twala to facilitate for us the panel discussion. Dr. Twala.
Thank you, Prof. Opelorsta. Greetings to everyone on board today. Thank you for participating in today's session. What a bang we've had in the opening lead presentations. It's really been exciting for me to listen here. And I can see that in the chat box, there's engagements, there's questions that are being raised. So we're really going to try, to speed up so that we ensure that there's enough time for the whole audience to engage with our lead speakers, to engage with our panelists that we have today. But from our lead presentations, we've actually gotten some, there's uniformity in the message that we are getting. We've had this historic issue of government criticism, or when it comes to water and the environment, where the criticism was first that nothing is being done. I think from the presentations that we've had today, we can see that there is something being done. The custodian being the Department of Water and Sanitation is involved, but what is even more exciting is that not-for-profit organizations have also gotten involved. And it is clear that, whilst we can say that it is somebody's problem, we are clearly contributing to the problem, but we can also contribute, to the solution. I am aware of a case just coming from sources of pollution when it comes to private residencies, somewhere in the eastern parts of Pretoria, whereby I can estimate that for over 10 years, maybe even longer than that, in certain private residence estate, there's been issues of an overflowing, sewer station, which was an outcry for a long time. Fortunately, this year, that pump station has been upgraded. But what that has meant is that the receiving dams downstream have actually now, during the dry season, are drying out, and the fishermen are not happy. So the solution has now been implemented, but to find that there's a certain portion of society that's been now affected, and they are not happy. And this brings us to the question of collaboration and management in supporting the implementation of the eutrophication management strategy. We're also going to look during our panel at aspects related to research, technology, and development to address eutrophication, as well as look at the technical capacity that is needed to support the implementation of this strategy. And I must mention that the eutrophication management strategy for South Africa has got certain supporting strategies, and collaboration is one of them. Now, the Academy of Science of South Africa is excited by being here today to be part of this conversation whereby we're looking at science contributing to a solution, but also how society can be part of this. Now, in our panel today, and I'm not going to read the long bios that we have of our panelists, but we've got Ms. Debbie Moore from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and Environment. And also we've got Ms. Precious Mkula from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. My first set of questions are going to be posed to the two. And then later on, we're going to be having Professor Masindi Bahongele from Magalies Water, as well as Dr. Rembu Magoba from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research when we look at the technical aspects that are there being implemented to support the eutrophication management strategy implementation. So I'm going to start first by posing questions to DFFE as well as Darren. Firstly, just to get your opinion there, Debbie. So DFFE is South Africa's designated authority with regards to chemicals management. The responsibility that we are assigned by the NEMA Act of 1998. Now, we understand that we've got Water Affairs, being the custodian of water resources and water services in this regard. But we'd just like to hear in the spirit of cooperation, which has been, receiving heavy criticism previously, that different government portfolios are not working together, to solve societal issues. We'd like just to get what proactive measures is DFFE involved in with regards to proactive control of the scourge of nutrient loading into water resources. That's the first question to you, Debbie. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Twala. Just to let you know, DFFE has the mandate for biological control research and implementation in South Africa. So, and our aim is to have all water bodies state-owned as a priority by 2050. And as we currently stand, about 80% of all the water bodies, state-owned water bodies in the country, is under biological control to some extent. So they have got biological control on them. We have reduced the infestations, the floating macrophytes, mostly water hyacinth, down to 4% on some, and the Hartbeespoort Dam was down to 4% cover in April last year, just before we handed it over to Magalies Water. Now, how we work is there's various acts that we work in connection to. So that's the National Water Act, Section 21, because we also need to comply to the Section 21, mostly CNIs. With regards to if a chemical is going to be applied or if we are going to apply biocontrol onto a system, and Act 36. Now, how we work with Act 36 is we currently are registering biocontrol and a sublethal dosage of a safe glyphosate. So, and the first one that we have registered is Kilomax, sublethal dosage with Megamelus scutularis for water hyacinth. And we've had very, very successful effects with that combination, where we have reduced biocontrol, or we've reduced the water hyacinth down to sustainable levels, which is less than 10% in a period of 9 months. Now, that is incredibly fast for water hyacinth. So, and we currently now working on a sublethal dosage for Kariba weed, Salvinia molesta, plus Neohydronomus affinis. So we're going to look at that sort of combination as well. And we also managed to get a registration for Salvinia, the common Salvinia, Salvinia minima, in a short period of time, and we're looking at a sublethal combination for that as well. What we also have to ensure is that we stay in line with our obligations, and so that would be the Kyoto Protocol, the Nagoya Protocol, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and specifically targets 6 and 7, the SDGs 3, 6, 7, 8, 13, and 14, the Paris Agreement, the United Nations Convention on desertification, United Nations Framework on the Convention on Climate Change, the Montreal Protocol, Stockholm Convention, Rotterdam Convention, Basel and Bamako Conventions, and the multilateral environmental agreements. So that's where we come in as NDAs. With regards to the to working with Act 36, when it comes to chemicals management, we also need to ensure that we comply to the global harmonization system of the classification and labeling of chemicals, and SACM. So there's a lot of things that we need to comply to, but also a lot that we need to ensure that that others comply to. So we need to make sure that the HHPs, for instance, so the list of HHPs that are identified and are banned according to the HHPs identified by the registrar, which is the CMRs, the carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox pesticides, and those are the first 20 were banned on the 1st of June. 9 were derogated because there was 29 on the list. And then, and so we then managed to ensure that those ones are actually banned and are then taken off, and ensure that those aren't used in future. Thanks.
Thank you for giving those insights. And you've touched on something that we're going to come back to later on. But you've actually taken the words out of my mouth with regards to Act 36, because that leads us to Ms. Nkula's, inputs. I hope you are still there, Precious, because what we'd like to just hear a bit more now is with regards to the mandate given to the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. You play a critical role now on the symptom side of eutrophication, by the way, and this is something which I think is more visible to the public. That's when the public outcry actually raises, when we see the symptom, getting worse in our favorite sporting dams and so forth. So now we just would like to check, what are the department's, processes and regulations that are there with regards to ensuring the safety, of some of the remedies that Debbie has just mentioned, now. And we, as she said, they need to comply with the Act 36, which you need. But if you can just share, some of those, because one of the issues that the public outcry has been around the spraying of the pesticides and recently in the Vaal, but we know that this has taken place previously elsewhere. But from what Debbie has indicated is that the formulations are now different, for example, for glyphosate that you mentioned, with regards to the common one that is applied. So if you can just take the stage, Ms. Nkula, to share the perspectives in support from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. If you can come through.
Okay, good day, everyone. I'm Precious Nkula. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. And for benefit of everyone, Precious had already mentioned that she's got issues with her camera, so apologies for that she can't show herself, but we know it's not her, assistant that is here. Thank you. Over to you, Precious.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, I cannot show my face here. Don't have a camera on my screen. As Act 36, we have, I think, if I can summarize under the Act 36 of 1947, our responsibility is one for registration of pesticides and fertilizers and agricultural remedies and stock remedies. But apart from registration, we have second responsibility, which is the regulation, of which I think our topic today comes in even more. It's on the regulation because it's now in the management of the pesticides once they are out there after registration. Because the registration firstly provides and makes them available. But the question is then, what then happens once they are out there in the environment? What is our role? In terms of regulation, our role as a regulator is to provide really the policies as to how the pesticides can be handled and managed in a responsible manner. And also we engage with the industry as the registration holders to get feedback on what's happening on the ground. And as well, we interact with other departments. We do not necessarily single out eutrophication as an issue, but it's generally on chemicals management. That would be the role. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Hopefully it does, because generally we do not single out a specific effect. It's on general chemicals, responsible chemicals management.
No, thanks a lot for outlining that, Precious. And are there beyond, the act that you mentioned, regulations that the department or, guidelines that the department implements, to ensure that there is, for example, with regards to the spraying of the glyphosate that we was talking about here. So are there standardized protocols that the department has set in place or follows to ensure that the risk, of non-targeted recipients is reduced in spraying of these chemicals?
Okay, I think that would align with providing the correct information on product labels as to how they can be used and where they can be used. Because if there are restrictions that should be put on a product to say it cannot be used in specific areas or near water bodies or near other non-targeted areas, then those indications will be on the product label, so that the end user will know how and where to use those products.
No, thanks a lot, ma'am, for that input. I would like to now move over to Prof. Bahangele, and after that, Dr. Magoba. Prof. Masindi, at Makali's Water, you've got a water services mandate, not wastewater treatment, of course, but I assume that in line of undertaking your responsibility as a water board, you have to abstract, water from bodies that are maybe impacted by eutrophication in some instances, maybe eutrophic, bodies. Is Makali's or water boards generally part of the conversation with regards to reducing inputs into water resources? You can highlight examples where Makalis is involved, but also within your network of water boards, especially those that only have the water services provision, mandate. Because you can say, well, we're not part of the problem, but at the end of the day, you have to abstract water to provide to the citizens from the same bodies, water bodies, which are impacted. Over to you, Prof. Masindi.
No, thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, indeed, Makali's Water, which is the entity of the Department of Water and Sanitation, participate in the catchment management forums. What we basically do so that at least our participation becomes more meaningful and scientifically informed, we also participate into catchment surveillance initiative and exercises, and we identified areas of catchment activities that are also contributing towards the contamination of water body, and highlights those type of contaminants that are available in water bodies, and the parameters that are also making water difficult to treat and increasing the treatability index of the water. And how we achieve that, we mainly do that through the tracking of contaminants and fingerprinting exercises within the catchment, so that we can understand who are the main contributors towards the pollution that we are receiving as Makali's water, and what are the measures that we can put in place to avert and arrest the challenges that we're experiencing in our raw water abstraction point, so that at least when you know the source of pollution and the type of contaminants that you're receiving, then you are able to safeguard yourself and assemble your systems in a way that they will be able to tackle the upcoming load of contaminants. We also have a turnaround strategy that we have mainly developed and to redress any deviation from the regulatory frameworks. So from our side, we mainly look into SANS 241 specifications. We also look into other guidelines and standards that governs the usability of the water that we abstract from the riverine ecosystems. And this also assists in triggering the compliance and enforcement from our department, because we work closely with the department. And I'm sure you know that Makali's Water has been appointed by the Department of Water and Sanitation to act as the implementing agent for the remediation of RTPS Port Dam. Very same exercises in terms of recognizing survey and water quality surveillance and fingerprinting of the types of contaminants that we are receiving in the system. And the sources of those contaminants are also part of our initiatives. And we also assist in identifying whether these the type of contaminants that we are receiving are from a point source or non-point source. So that's how we participate as Makali's Water. And that information is given to the catchment management forums. We also apprise the department of the status of the riverine ecosystems, including the impoundments that we abstract water for. That is our status as Makali's Water. Thank you so much.
No, thanks. Once I still have you, Prof. Masindi, upstream of your, geographical boundary, coming into Gauteng, we understand that is, part of where the problem arises from. Are you able to be part of, the network there within the Gauteng provincial department as part of the catchment, because those catchments are connected?
Yes, I would say that we actively participate. One, because we are the downstream water users as Makali's Water. Secondly, from our appointment as the implementing agent by the Department of Water and Sanitation, specifically looking into the RTPS Port Dam, we were supposed to participate into catchment management forum, and the turnaround strategy that we have developed as Makali's Water, we seek to address the challenges that we are experiencing in RTPS Port Dam, was to manage the loading of nutrients into the systems, which serve as a catalyst towards the prolific growth of aquatic plants. And we have had different speakers highlighting the issue of hyacinth covering the top of the dam and all that. And our quest was mainly looking into the minimizing the coverage into less than 5% in the dam. And we didn't really want to implement any of the solutions that would have ecological footprints. We had to remove the floating plants and use them for the production of fertilizers, which we donated to emerging farmers. We donated close to 1 ton of fertilizers to emerging farmers, which is a very good initiative when looking into circular economy, waste valorization, and waste beneficiation, and converting something that is called the waste into a resource. That was something very, very good from our intervention as Makali's Water. And I would say we really have a voice upstream of our abstraction point, and we are contributing actively.
That is excellent. That is excellent. I think at least from the conversation that we've had so far, there are connections between the different, role players, and that is something that is encouraging and needs to be, strengthened going, forward. Dr. Magoba, now I would like to come to you because the eutrophication management strategy has identified the National System of Innovation, of which the CSIR is part of, as a key role player in devising, R&D solutions. But it seems we haven't overcome the eutrophication, problem up to date, although we've had research for years now. Can you just share, as a representative of the National System of Innovation, what research maybe has been implemented in the recent time, or what current research and innovation initiatives are institutions such as yourself undertaking to contribute to mitigating the spread of eutrophication? Over to you, Dr. Magoba.
Thank you very much, Chair. CSIR, of course, is an entity of the SI, and our mandate include the research and development and also innovation to support a capable state. So it is true that we should be playing a role in managing or controlling this eutrophication. Our focus area at CSIR when it comes to this particular matter include the development of nature-based solutions to address this problem of eutrophication. We do this in collaborations with the University of Free State because we understand the importance of collaborations and also working together with different entities, either academics and also research institutions, and also private who are also interested in this matter. So working with University of Free State, we have developed what we call a FICO remediation treatment technology. This is the technology that is very relevant for the removal or reducing high concentrations of nutrients in various water bodies. Of course, for now, we are targeting wastewater, which seems to be a major problem. We have implemented this technology in some of the municipalities in the Western Cape and also in Limpopo, in Motatema. In the Western Cape, it's in Matsikama and also in Mossel Bay. We have implemented this successfully. And we believe that this technology is the way to go, listening to previous speakers where there is too much focus on FICO remediation. We believe that working with the other entities will be able to play a major role in deploying this technology in various areas where there's a serious challenge of FICO remediation. Again, at CSIR, we have got capabilities for comprehensive surface water resource assessment, and also for the testing of water quality, where we are able to then understand what are the main pollutants that we need to design a relevant technology for the treatment of either wastewater or various water that we are addressing as a contributor to the eutrophication challenge that we are dealing with. We are also playing a role in the development of cleaner wastewater treatment technologies. We are involved currently in the decentralized wastewater treatment system, which we have deployed or we are piloting in one of the schools in Gauteng, which is something that is also contributing towards the reduction of nutrient loads in various water bodies. So with this, I believe that CSIR have got a role to play, and we are looking for the partners where we can be able to deploy the technologies that we have developed with our partners to make sure that the aim or the objectives of these technologies is realized. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks for those insights, Dr. Makoba. It is exciting and pleasing to hear that your technologies, are now being implemented at municipalities. And roughly, some of the technologies that you mentioned I think you said in Motatema, Limpopo, and the Western Cape, for how long have they been running? And are you seeing good success in dealing with the problem of nutrient enrichment?
I must say that the challenge is the sustainability of the technology long after CSIR deployed the technology, because there is a process of handover. We would expect the hosting municipality to take over the technology and implement, which is still a challenge. We are not seeing the sustainability of such technology once CSIR leave the space, because there are some budgetary constraints associated with various municipalities. So there is a serious need for investment towards technology in various municipalities if we are to sustain nature-based solutions. I think currently most of the municipalities are still believing on mechanical solutions rather than the nature-based solutions. So together as a scientific community, working with public and also the community at large, we really need to work together to see the effectiveness of this technology long after the deployment by CSIR. As CSIR cannot continue operating within those municipal space after the deployment of such technology. So that we still see as a gap and as a worrying challenge within the CSIR.
No, thank you, Dr. Makoba, and thanks to the panelists. I mean, I note that we've run up above our time because we started a bit late with our panel. So I'm going to request that I hand back to Prof. Oberholzer now, but our panelists are still available. They will also be engaged during the Q&A. Just that we note that there is quite good interest for the participants to engage with the speakers as well as the panelists. So our panelists, please do not drop out because you may receive questions now during the Q&A. But Prof. Oberholzer, I would like to hand back to you for the formal Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Twala. Colleagues, we're moving over now to the last part of our webinar, and that is the questions and answers. You can impose questions to the panel that just Dr. Twala presented now to us. And then obvious our speakers earlier in the day. I just ask you one thing, please don't drift off of the structure or the aim of this webinar. Remember, it's related to solutions for eutrophication. So you got all the experts, you can ask the questions. And then please, lastly, please just introduce yourself so that the person that needs to answer the question know who you are. Okay, so I open the floor now for questions and answers. Okay, Mark, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the breadth of these presentations. Perhaps to the CSIR, the last presentation, and linking it to some of the points that I was making, that change within the chemical space of the country, the consumer market, the retailers, the industry, the production space. It's good to hear that they are focusing on new nature-based solutions. Is there modeling done, or has there been modeling done that can illustrate that if we were to change certain chemicals within the retail sector, so for instance, phosphates, certain surfactants, the materials within disposable nappies, has there been modeling done that shows and indicates that if that change is made, it will have a positive direct impact to the level of eutrophication down the line? So I'm not sure if the CSIR is perhaps the right party, or maybe even Debbie's side. I know Debbie's looking more at the biological.
Yes, I can come in, Mark, through Chair. Yes, indeed, that is one of issues that we have picked up when we were engaging with a number of clients. But because we are dealing with the biological parameters, it is very much important to model it using a particular system where you've got enough data. You cannot necessarily generalize the modeling results. There will be system specific, but the model can be done for that particular system of which the data is available. So that has been something that the decision makers are interested on to understand. If we put so much investment here, what is it that we are likely to get as an output of the system? But we have picked up that you cannot generalize the findings from one treatment plant or one system to another. You really need to get the data from that particular system that you are dealing with. So it is possible to do so, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Because you certainly, and I understand what you're saying, is every catchment, just like every river has a different nature. Then, for instance, the Hennops River is affected because of the industry that is within the the Tembisa Modderfontein environment of particular companies that are using particular chemicals, for instance. And you're saying that would be different, for instance, to the Yuxke, which is affected by a lot of broader residential, but also industrial. And I saw some of the comments on the question group for my paint problem in one of the rivers, you know. But it is interesting to know that, I mean, I'll take the example of washing up liquid. You know, we sell washing up liquid in supermarkets in concentrated form, but the concentrated form doesn't mean that people don't put it in en masse into the system. But if we were to remove that element from the system or adapt the chemicals being used, which is being done in Europe now in order to address their eutrophication problem, it should be able to model across different areas the impact of the inflow to the likes of Hati or the outflow from a particular wastewater treatment works. So I'd be interested to know more on that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Hopefully your question has been answered. Can I have more questions? We've got around, if I check, we've got still 20 minutes before the end of the webinar. Any other questions from other partners or institutes?
Prof, we've got a hand from Futhi Vilagazi, if you don't see that on your side.
Okay, I didn't see that, but let's go ahead. Let's get the question there.
Thank you so much, Prof, and colleagues. Thank you for very insightful presentations and some insightful reflections from the panel, and for a very diverse group of speakers looking at different issues around eutrophication and some of the solutions. I have asked some of my questions in the chat and they have been answered, and I did indicate that I do have follow-up, so I'll be following up with some of the speakers. So I'm just going to concentrate on the ones that maybe were not covered in terms of the answers. The first one is on, I do understand that some of the questions did indicate that they did not try to make an impression that the sources of the pollution were mostly focused on wastewater treatment plants. And I highlighted the issue around sewer discharges that are coming from poorly maintained sewer infrastructure, surcharging manholes, and overloaded pump stations that are overflowing as well. At the moment in KZN, we are dealing with an algal bloom at Albert Falls Dam, and our assessments over the years have been indicating that there's a lot of inputs that are coming from poorly maintained sewer infrastructures and overloaded infrastructures. And the recent assessments that we did as part of this algal bloom found on the spot surcharging manholes as well as overflowing sewer infrastructure in the upstream catchments. So as much as there is indication that the green drop does also cover the sewer reticulation, but there's much emphasis just only focusing on the wastewater treatment plants and the need to upgrade those and refurbish. But I think that there is a huge need to focus on also on the collection system, especially around compliance and enforcement, to ensure that the contributors do repair, but do not only repair the infrastructure, but rehabilitate the affected the affected water resources, because rehabilitation then also ensures that there is improvement of water downstream. And there was reference to the waste discharge charge system. The waste discharge charge system also just focuses mostly on the source discharges, especially the wastewater treatment plants and industries, and does not touch much on the sewer discharges coming from the poorly maintained sewer infrastructure. But another significant contributor is agriculture. The agricultural pollution from fertilizers, herbicides, as well as the pollution control ponds from the slurry dams. Those are significant contributors that have not really been looked at. The National Water Act does provide for that to be regulated through water use licenses, but there's not much water use licenses that are being granted to agricultural communities. Most of the agricultural communities get licenses for abstractions, and we do need the agricultural community to also get licenses for water quality related uses, because this will also help in terms of compliance, in terms of the water use license conditions, include conditions for monitoring their impact on the water resource and rehabilitate. And that's where also the waste discharge system is also missing, especially in terms of diffuse pollution. So we really do need that to be taken into consideration. Thank you for the work that SALGA is doing, but we do also understand that there are still significant gaps, especially around ensuring that there is ring fencing of the budget for infrastructure maintenance, especially the sewer infrastructure, as well as the potable water infrastructure. So can we get also that being looked at in terms of how can SALGA influence the municipalities to ensure that there is ring fencing and the budget is being used where it's supposed to be used for, as well as ensuring that there is also facilitating further investments into where can the additional budgets be sourced from, because there is also understanding that the budget that's available from national treasury may not be enough. So I just wanted to highlight on those areas, but also on the monitoring and evaluation of the eutrophication strategy. Can that be strengthened? Because if it's just being done at CMFs as well as the National Water Quality Forum, some of us are not part of the National Water Quality Forum and we do not get to see the progress. And at CMF level, in our case in KZN, we attend almost all of the CMFs, and there's not much that we've seen on the eutrophication strategy. And with these algal blooms happening, we are going to see even more coming with the impacts of climate change. And we've seen extreme weather events affecting the soil infrastructure. So we are likely going to see more going into the future, and we need to really strengthen on the interventions. There was mention of nature-based solutions, but we need to see the department taking a lead and influencing the local governments, especially municipalities, to also adopt these nature-based solutions and also including it into some of the compliance and enforcement conditions in terms of the directives that are given that they should be rehabilitating the affected water resources using these nature-based solutions in collaboration with stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nkazi, for your contribution there. I think what comes out of your is specifically that there need to be better communication about the national strategy and the implementation going forward. I think it's important, and that's what we see in the first presentation today, that there is improvement. The same with SALGA, there is implementation, but maybe the general public doesn't always know about these things. Right, we still got 10, 12 minutes left. Is there any hands up there? Otherwise, I'm going to move to the question and answer box. I don't see any hands. Let's go there. The first from the chat box, from the question and answer box there. Is there any discussion on the national long-term solution of new developments having their own mini wastewater treatment plants or new buildings requiring urine separation toilets or composting toilets? That was the question there, and I may ask that to the CSR that is always ahead on these new technologies and research. If Dr. Rambo can just come there on board. Dr. Rambo?
I, Prof, I'm having an internet connection. I lost you a little bit. Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. If you can just briefly possibly answer these questions of separation toilets that is separating urine, and then obvious also other green technology that can be included in the future in buildings. As we heard from the presentations, especially from Mark's presentation, is it's not about us just here at that moment in space and time, but what are we going to do going forward in the future?
There is a greater opportunity to include sanitation technology that is also linked to what I referred to as a decentralized wastewater treatment works. So this technology that we are talking about, the decentralized wastewater treatment systems, it's able to treat sewage in an area where you don't have a formal sewage systems. So by doing so, you are reducing the impact of what would have ended up in the nearby water bodies, especially in rural communities where you still find communities relieving themselves in the bushes. That becomes a serious challenge where whenever it rains, everything ends in the water bodies. So when you have got this decentralized system, you are able to then service those communities that are really not having that formal sewer network system. So the developers of these sanitation technologies working with CSIR can be able to then contribute significantly to the reduction of high nutrient load that also come with a very poor water quality on various water bodies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rembo, for that answer. I see Dr. Twala's hand is up. Dr. Twala, please go ahead.
No, thanks, Prof. Just to elevate one of the questions from the chat box. The first one to Ms. Nyamande with regards to the partnership network that supports the Department of Water and Sanitation in implementing this strategy. Do they feel they have received sufficient sectoral support to enable them to go forward? The second one is to Mr. Luyaba with regards to revenue collection, and I think the previous question also touched into that. This is now going down. What means are municipalities putting up in place, to ring fence funding for water and sanitation infrastructure? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Twala. I think that question can also go to SALGA, to Mr. Lubua from SALGA. Is he still online?
Yes, Chair. Can I come in?
Thank you, sir. Can you just answer the question related to finance by municipalities to ring fence it? Because obviously you mentioned in your presentation there was six items and they all need to be connected. So what's the situation around ring fencing money to upgrade and maintain infrastructure by local municipalities and obviously improving the effluent?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. I think let me also answer it as a consumer. So I think firstly, in terms of municipal debt, we've clearly got a problem in terms of collection. The Water Research Commission recently did a 2022 study on perceptions about service quality. Unwillingness to pay increased from about 20% to about 40%. But the fact is, when people feel that they're not getting a quality service, when they are not getting a quality service, willingness to pay will decrease. But not paying creates a perpetual cycle where a municipality's ability to actually provide the service, even if they want to, actually can't happen. And evidence of that is that municipalities are owed over 314 billion by households, government, and business. And we in turn owe the water trading entity and the water boards about 45 billion. And we owe Eskom about 60 billion. So this revenue collection thing translates to that. And when we as municipalities don't pay the water trading entity and the water boards, they then cannot continue to function. As we know, we had to close one, and Vaal Central now, I think by November, will be shutting its doors if they don't receive money. So the issue of revenue collection is a problem. Then the second part is ring fencing, which says when the revenue has been collected, ensuring that the money goes to the right thing. Colleagues, we must also be careful here not to oversimplify things. Revenue collection, ring fencing works perfectly fine when you've got a service that is financially sustainable, i.e., I need 10 rands per liter to run my water service, I receive 10 rands. What we have in the local government system is a issue where water in particular and sanitation are not self-sustaining. They're supposed to be getting cross-subsidization from electricity, which should be generating about 30 to 41% of the revenue. So when we talk about ring fencing, we must be careful to remember that water as a standalone business in most instances cannot sustain itself. And so what do we mean when we want a business that needs cross-subsidization to have ring fencing? That's just something to be cautious of. And then the last input I will make is there's an expectation that a utility, for whatever it is, must be efficient so that you and I as consumers don't pay for inefficiency. So we're sitting at about 40% non-revenue water. When we talk about cost-reflective tariffing, who must pay for that? And it obviously can't be us as end users. And we've recently been doing some work on this. It's called Municipal Infrastructure Management Efficiency. There's a paper recently out on the South African Journal of Science titled Unwilling or Unable, looking at water services from 2019 to 2024. So there's a whole suite of things that need to be fixed. But in closing, there is a problem and we need to fix it, but it's across the system. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, sir, for that comprehensive feedback. I can take a last question. I think, Mark, I see your hand is up there. That will be the last question. We've got 3 minutes and we need to still close. Mark, you're on.
Thank you for that opportunity. Just this point regarding incentivized use to wastewater treatment, or indeed, I think it extends also to recycling waste, to be honest. I really think that we see a lag. So in the role we have on the catchment forums, we get sight of water usage license applications, but there is a large lag between development applications that are submitted to that go via GDARD, and particularly when you've had a slowdown of economy. So some of the development patterns that are going to hit us in the next 2 years are developers that put their applications in some 5 years ago, which means by the time new methodologies come to light through CSIR and find their way to Johannesburg and the COJ, we are doing much of the same and then increasing the problem. It would be really nice to have a more direct link between forums that see the water usage license applications and being able to fast track but not cut corners, but fast track the adoption of new technology that is proven, that could then give tax incentives towards developers, which they like, to become encouraged to actually incorporate newer methodologies of reducing nutrient loads into the system. By example, the smart city being proposed for Lanseria doesn't even have an application of technologies. Therefore, it will find itself doing things the same way as the city is doing it now and flowing downstream for Machalis to deal with in years to come. But we could actually do that using DWS, DFFE, GDARD, and a linkage to the CSIR. And that's where we believe the NGOs can have a role of having an objective view. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, as I previously said before I hand over, I think communication in the future will become more and more important related to our strategies and to the implementation of different solutions. So thank you for that answer. Colleagues, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I don't want to lose some people. So we will have now the closing, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Gibani to give us a closure, and then I will close the webinar.
Thank you very much, Prof. Oberholzer, for the great facilitation. We appreciate the great facilitation. We appreciate your exceptional leadership, as well as leading from the front. Thank you very much, Prof. And to our manager at the Science Advisor and Strategic Partnerships at ASAF, Dr. Twala, thank you very much for ensuring a successful engagement and with a goal-oriented practical solutions for eutrophication. Thank you very much, Dr. Twala. Our heartfelt appreciation goes to all the presenters, to all the speakers, for your time, for your knowledge, for your insights. Ms. Nyamande, Mr. Becker, Mr. Luyaba, Mr. Maklu, Ms. Debbie, Prof. Masindi, Ms. Mkula, and Dr. Makoba. Thank you so very much. Your dedication and passion for this topic, it was so evident, and you inspired and you educated everyone in attendance. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your expertise. And this webinar, it was more of a collaborative effort between ASAF, CSIR, the Water Research Council, as well as the American Chemical Society. We'd like to thank all our collaborators, and the American Chemical Society is represented today by Dr. Maggie Mills, who is the managing editor. Thank you so very much. And the CSIR represented by Dr. Rembu Magoba. Thank you very much, who is the manager at the CSIR. The Water Research Council represented by Mr. Bonani Matikizela. Thank you very, very much. And to our executive officer who's in attendance as well, Professor Himla Sodial, thank you very much for your great strides and your leadership. At ASAF, we aspire to be the apex organization for science and scholarship in South Africa, recognized and connected nationally as well as internationally. So it is platforms of this nature that we utilize in order to achieve that mandate. Special thanks to all the participants, to all the attendees, for the questions, for the engagement. It has been a very engaging webinar. We thank everyone in attendance, and a special thanks to the organizing team led by Aluwani, Dr. Twala, and the team at ASAF. Thank you very much. And now I will have to hand over to Prof. Opahulster. Thank you very much for everyone who is in attendance. It's been a very productive session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And colleagues, thanks very much. I think we established what we wanted to establish. As I said from the beginning, we were looking at solutions. I just want to remind you that I said in the beginning that this is a series of workshops or webinars that started in June 2024. The WRC was presenting the first webinar series, on the series, and I think there will be follow-ups around this. So just keep in contact, and we will take it forward. Thank you very much for your collaborative inputs today. I think unfortunately we're running out of time, but there's a lot to be said. At this stage we were 111 participants, and there were more than 16 questions and answers in the chat box. I think there's still a lot that we need to do in the way forward. I thank you, and you must have a nice day going forward. Thanks for everybody's back for also organizing this specific webinar, and yes, also Dr. Twala and his whole team. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.